Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
And we are live. Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. Happy Saturday, folks.
Happy Saturday.
Hope you're doing well out there and staying safe. And we wanted to, put our sympathies out there for the victims and families of the Kentucky tornadoes that occurred seemingly overnight.
Yes.
And, thoughts and prayers. I don't really pray, but I do send good energy. So you're on our mind. So I hope the rest of you are staying safe. Last Thursday, we had a lot of fun last Thursday.
We did. It was Thursday.
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 Today is serious Saturday.
Yes.
So we were talking about the camera movement and a possible haunted object on the back shelf behind us. And I played a little video we had made and had captured this in different shows. And of course, it moved again while we were talking about it in that show. And I haven't clipped it, but you can go back and look at it. If it moves today, we don't know. We're still trying to kind of debunk that. But oddly enough, you know what? Just as a side project, I got the little cat ball here. And, yeah, it's working. We'll put that on there. And if it goes off during the show, then, well, you'll see it in real time. So, what else is going on, Kristen?
I'm pulling up all the comments here on my computer.
Chats? Oh, yeah. We got to get our chats going. And we got to slow down. We've been racing around all day, so
yeah.
But that's not unusual for us. I did see an interesting story, and it's kind of an older story. And let me see if I can share. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. And this is about twins.
Oh, yes.
And I thought this was really kind of fascinating from a perspective of consciousness. Let me see if I can share this. Okay. So this is Abby and Brittany Hansel. Hansel is their name. And they're conjoined twins. And it's fascinating. They have separate sets of hearts, lungs, but an arm. And I'm not trying to exploit them in any way when I say this. I'm really looking at this from a consciousness perspective because I can't imagine growing up like this, but they have distinctly different personalities, right? Where they share some organs and have separate ones as well. And that's them as a baby. And the idea that consciousness can pervade the vessel or meat bag is what we say a lot of times. Some days I feel like a vessel and some days I feel like a meat bag. I find really intriguing, Here's a little government thing. I was going through this article, and they have their driver's licenses, and they both had to take 2 driving tests, even though they're basically one body. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, occupy 1 seat. They had to take 2 separate driving tests, which is kind of crazy. And one side is controlled by one of them, and the other side is controlled by the other. So they have to do this in a coordinated effort.
That's interesting.
This is a real thing. Like I didn't even know if this was real when I first saw it. And I'm like, is this real? And I'm familiar with conjoined twins, but they usually aren't as symmetrical, I guess, as they are. So I find that fascinating that they can inhabit that. So even something like walking is a bit of a challenge because they have to work with each other. Because one side doesn't have control of the other. So very, very interesting. They are riding a bicycle, and there's the driving, right?
That's great.
So that's pretty cool. And I just think it's interesting to think about that. We talk about panpsychism a lot on the show, and that is the ability to for consciousness to pervade matter, because we're all kind of made of the same stuff. And why an inanimate object like the doll behind me might be haunted. So I just find that interesting. All right. A couple of comments out there already. Hey, Gene Harrison. Hello from Florida. All right. And we got a great guest for you guys today.
Yes, we do.
We're going to talk to Mark Fiorentino. He's going to share his views on how the universe really works based on his study and research of Einstein's unified field theory. He will discuss how the application of Einstein's theory can be used to travel through space, renewable energy, future technology, alien tech. He'll also talk about the connection to conspiracy theories, including UFOs and that alien tech, as well as other controversial subjects such as near-death experience revelations that are linked to the theory of super relativity. So let's bring him right on. Hey there, Mark. How are you doing?
Hello. Good
Welcome.
to be here, guys.
Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. Hey there, Michael King from Tennessee. Hello. I see Gail Heisen out there.
Yes.
Great to spend Saturday listening to you guys. So, yeah, we got some folks out there, and we want to get right into things. And I know we were talking before the show about unified field theory and some other kind of scientific topics, but you've also had psychic experiences. And I thought maybe we could start there about readings that you got when you were younger.
Yeah. Since the book has come out, when the book first came out, I was just saying, that was a lot of work, 4 years, and I'm tired, and I don't think I'm going to write a book, another book. And that's changed since that time because of what's in the book and the verifications actually I've gotten from the other side about what I've done. I always thought I had it right, but they say I have it right. So now it's my job to convince the scientific realm somehow through writing papers, which I've done and so forth. But yes, I have had some psychic encounters, and that's what the next book is going to be about, because it spans across 45 years of experiences with psychics and with my own personal experiences that I've had, seeing guardian angels, hearing guardian angels, and so forth. And my spirit guides is what many other people call it. But yeah, when I was 20 years old, me and a gang of guys just kind of kidding around decided we were going to go out to Cassadaga and have a real good time, get our fortunes told, just something different to do. And then from there, Cassadaga is about halfway between where we live and Daytona Beach. And then from there, we went to Daytona Beach to have, a good weekend at the beach. And
That's where my mom lives.
Daytona?
Yeah, she's been there for like almost 40 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good place. I've had a lot of fun there in the past. I haven't been there in years, but it's a great place. So a bunch of us went in two different cars, and it was an October day, very perfect kind of a fall day in Florida, overcast and windy. And we got into Cassadaga, and it's like going into the past. It's kind of a spooky little place, very, very small little town. And we got there, and the wind was blowing and so forth. And actually, as we're driving there, this song comes on the radio that we're listening to. I think it's by James Taylor. And the first verse of the song goes, "Distant hands in foreign lands are turning hidden wheels, causing things to come about that no one seems to feel. All invisible from where we stand, yet the connections come to pass, and all too hard to comprehend, they affect us nonetheless." So that kind of set the theme for the day. I thought about that as I was hearing it, and I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting how that kind of fits in with what we're kind of investigating right now in this little adventure. So we went on ahead to the town, and we parked there, and as we were talking, a tree limb blew off one of the trees and hit our friend's car, and they got scared and they left.
Wow.
So it's just me and this other guy, and we started just knocking on doors because they had little signs in front of their house if they were psychic or not. The first couple we tried, they didn't come to the door, so we were getting a little spooked ourselves. But the third one we tried is a lady named Martha McKay, and she was just a classic little old lady psychic that you would dream up as just the way you would expect them to be. She's very nice and polite, and she got right down to business. I went in first. I had what I would consider a very normal reading, talked about my future. I was going to get married, have 2 children. I was going to get into electronics, although she was a person that was very past generation, not very familiar with what she was seeing in my future. It was very confusing to her. She was seeing things like monitors, computer monitors, and a lot of cabling, which I've I lived into that scene that she saw, that she tried to describe to me. She says, I see you surrounded with cables and wires and these screens, these TV screens with writing on them and all this stuff. And that did happen at IBM. I built myself like a chamber with tables, and I had computers all around me with the wires hanging down. One day I'm sitting there and I'm looking at this and I say, oh, this is what she saw. And
wow, yeah.
Every prediction she made came through, but the biggest prediction, she didn't tell me. So what happened was the guy that my friend, Jeff Jones, his name, we used to call him Duff, went in after me, and somewhere in his reading, she tells him something. And so, he finishes up, I finish up. We get in the car, we're driving, and then he brings up, hey, that's really something she said about you, Mark. And I said, what? She said, someday you're going to be famous for some discovery, I don't know if it was a book I was going to write or an invention. Anyway, the idea invention stuck in my head. And I thought to myself, I wonder why she didn't tell me directly. That's kind of a big deal to kind of just skip over and wait for the next guy to come in and tell him. That was deliberate. That was deliberate by the other side. And I got the impression from that they withhold certain things so that you don't get messed up. And
that makes sense.
The future is very tricky. And what I've discovered now is we come into life with a plan. Everybody, all 8 billion people, come in here. We go into training before we're born. There's a lot of work and effort and a plan that you're going to try to remember and execute and do your work to advance your soul and so forth. So this started my realization of that, this first psychic encounter. So I thought about, why didn't she tell me? And I says, because I would ask questions. I would start digging right away. Well, what am I going to do? Because I would get working on it right away. Why wait?
Right. Absolutely.
That's the way I am. So they're smart enough to know. The other thing that she said, that when I asked her I was going to be happily married, she paused for quite a few seconds. And then she just nodded her head yes, like this, and said nothing more. So I said, that's a little odd. I mean, usually you would think them say, oh, yeah, she'll be very happily married. You have 2 kids, you live. She just nods her head yes and nothing more, gives no more information. So I'm a little suspicious about that. And I remembered thinking about that on the drive to Daytona. I said, I accept it, but I think there's something more there that they're not telling me. And sure enough, we got divorced. We were married for 16 years and it didn't work out. And so that prediction, even though it wasn't really said, I got the impression that there's more being said. A lot of psychics, they get stuff and they don't tell you everything. That's what a lot of people don't know. And I'm talking about the real psychics here, because the other side is saying, yeah, this thing is going to happen, but we have to lay low on this. We can't say too much because we'll mess them up.
They say too much. Yeah. I want to just interject something real quick. Casadega is sort of spiritual capital of Florida, right?
That's correct. Spiritualist capital of North America. The town is loaded with psychics, and they have their own church, which is basically a Christian, spiritualist Christian church, or at least it was back then. And it was just something I heard on a lark in a class discussion. The professor was talking about it, and I thought, man, that sounds cool. I'd like to do that. I'm interested in UFOs. I'm interested in psychics, and let's test it out and see if there's anything to this. And I got evidence. from her, and then ones thereafter also confirmed this future event, but would not give me hardly any details other than they said, yeah, there's something coming and it's going to take a lot longer than you think. And one of them said exactly that. His name was Russ Burgess. And these things, you know, I kept meeting these psychics over the years, and they all keep confirming there's something. So there's a cooperation across 45-year span up until this last one I talked to, Tamara Richardson, who just, once I wrote the book and I had finally done what I was supposed to, I finally got to that location. It was like going over a waterfall. Then all the information really started coming out. Okay, you're going to do this. This is what, you know, this is what's happening. This is what's really happening. This is who you are. This is where you came from. So that's all going to be in the next book. And there's a lot. And I'm going over those because I recorded those sessions. And it's been 3 years now, and I'm going over. And actually in those, predictions and discussions, she's not only getting stuff right then, but now things that she said actually did happen that I forgot about. And,
wow.
and like, oh, you will be doing PowerPoint presentations one day. And I never remembered that. I mean, it was like 80 minutes of information. And, I got a basic idea of what was going on in these sessions and what was really happening. I call it more or less an awakening. And that, this is how it works. And this is what I was sent to do. Oh, this is a lot of a responsibility. I'm not sure I'm up for this, but I'll give it my best effort. Yeah.
Right. Cherokee Child says real psychics have a huge responsibility to pass on information in a way that it can be accepted, but so it doesn't change a person's natural course, I think is what they mean there. And that's true. It's a subject that's come up here because we've had the privilege of talking to some very, very good psychics, one of which is in the audience out there, Robert Riggy. About like what happens if a person's going to meet their fate soon.
I always wondered that.
Say it. Do you tell them like, well, this is what I see, but you kind of just have to give that information without too much filter, I think, for it to be accurate.
Yeah, the future. See, I've wondered about how they can predict the future, and I actually made a prayer one night. This was back in the time as I was going through my divorce, and I was under incredible stress for the first 3 years. And I would pray at night, and my guardian angels responded amazingly powerfully. And one night they gave me, I was dreaming, can you really tell the future? Because I'm thinking about this one that happened many years ago, and then the ones thereafter that we haven't gotten into yet, but they're all implying something. And I'm saying, how could they know the future? I have free will and choice. How can this be? And then they showed me. So that night after I made that prayer, I had a dream. And this was no ordinary dream. It was just one of those full color, high res dreams. And all I'm doing is I'm getting out of my car and walking into work. And as I'm walking, I see this beautiful sunrise. I'm walking toward the east, and I look down and I see the shiny dime heads up on a stripe, one of the parking stripes in the parking lot. And then I wake up in the middle of the night, and I said, well, that was a strange dream. I wonder what that was all about. And then I went back to sleep. And I woke up the next day and forgot all about it. So I drive into work. I'm driving to IBM. I park my car and I wander. I take different routes every day because the parking lot's huge. And I walk in. And then as I'm walking, I says, this sunrise looks very familiar, I'm thinking. And then I just happen to look down and I see the dime heads up on the stripe in the parking lot, just where I saw it in my dream. And then it all rushed back into my head. It says, wait a minute, I dreamed this last night.
It's a premonition.
But they showed me you could see into the future.
Wow.
Right.
They demonstrated it for me by giving me a dream. They put it in my head, however they do that. And I still have that dime. I had a friend that worked, drill a little hole, and I wear it as a necklace sometimes. But it's an incredibly personal experience, powerful. They were providing evidence that they exist, evidence that they're guardian angels, and you can tell the future. Because I needed to not lose my faith, because I was in a time when I was about to lose my faith. I was going through tremendous strain and struggle. Sure. And
divorce is really rough.
Yeah.
Oh, it was rough.
Don't feel bad.
Believe me.
Just telling you that. And just a comment on the other subject there, Gail, who's an amazing psychic ability, is unbelievable with Gail. I always feel that you don't share an upcoming death, for it is for the person to discover their dying path. And I would agree. I think it's just too much to tell someone. But it's funny how when we talk about free will and determinism, like, how does that fit, right? If these things are definitely going to happen to me, I don't know it yet. How does the psychic know? And it sounds like you're trying to find that out.
They work together, hand in hand. I read about an NDE. In this particular NDE, the person was given a tour of the pre-life experience before you're born. And this person details, yes, you go to classes, but you have to be prepared to come here, because this place, Earth, is one of the roughest places in the universe. It's a real big challenge. So you got to get prepped and you got ready. Then you go into this room, you raise your right hand, and you swear that you're going to try and remember your life path. That's your job, one and only job. Whatever that is, whatever life experiences you need to have, and try to do as well as you can, because God's gift to you is your life. What you do with it is your gift back to him. So it's important to understand this applies to everyone. That's all 8 billion people in this planet and other planets as well. They got different experiences. There's, different ways that their brains handle the material realm. Ours are very emotional. There's a lot of that going on. And so the way we think when we get here is strongly affected by the material world. And it's tough to break that kind of thinking and get into the spiritual kind of thinking that really is the ultimate goal of human beings, is to become more spiritual again, become more loving and compassionate and understanding. And, that's everybody's path, not just mine. That's everybody's deal. And you get it through your life path, your plan that was set in place before you were born.
Fascinating. I like that. And that's very well put. And I think you're right. I feel like the older that we get, I think the more spiritual, but like maturely spiritual we get. When you're young and you do have these more materialistic ideas and you're trying to empower your life, and you're like, maybe I want money, or I want love, and I want this and I want that. These are kind of like immediate things. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, but as you get older, you kind of want good for your children. You want good for society, for just a peaceful existence, less materialistic, I guess.
Yeah. You want to stop. It's not a matter of loving yourself or not. You want to love yourself. You want to love your fellow man as much as yourself, and you want to just enjoy this adventure, this ride together as much as you can. And you can either choose to do it by, being mangry every day and saying, and being grumpy and grouchy and blaming other people or whatever, or you can accept this as an adventure and just try to work things out as you go along.
Do the best you can.
Everybody's dealt a hand of cards. Each and every person is dealt their hand. That's the personality, the body they get, all of that's planned. And your job is to play that hand as best you can. That's the trick. That's what you want to do. You may only be dealt a pair of deuces, but people sometimes, even with that, if they play that hand right, they could beat somebody with 3 kings. All they got to do is bluff them, and they could do it. So in life, it's just a matter of taking the talents and the skills you got, applying them as efficiently as you can, and play that hand out and see what you could you can win. Basically, what you can do in life that matters, your experiences that you can take back with you when you leave this world. That's the only thing you get to take with you.
Right. And as far as free will goes, the world keeps turning, right? I mean, there's certain things that are just going to happen. Events are going to happen, whether you participate or not.
Well, your guardian angels are there to help you, and that's for everybody. There's nobody on this planet that's alone. Everybody has guardian. I don't care what faith you are, what religion. They're there for you, whether you believe in them or not. And if you learn to listen, which is something I have tried to learn over the years.
Right. Well, that's the tricky part right there, right?
Your life can go a lot better once you learn to listen to that intuition, that inner voice, not the one that's saying you can't do that, you're a failure, you're a bum, whatever, you you talk yourself into negatively. Most people, the biggest threat, the biggest problem in their life is themselves. That's your biggest thing, the obstacle to overcome. If you can just get yourself back on the right track, positive thinking, people have written books about it, but there really is something to it. And if you just do that, you will find yourself free inside, just feeling peaceful, and you stop the negative speech, and you just realize that no matter what happens, it's going to be all right. In the end, everybody gets to go home.
Yeah. I think actually, go ahead, babe.
I'm sorry, babe. We actually had something like this. We wanted to know, and we started talking to our guardian spirits, and we were trying to find out who they were or what they could, how they could help us in the time that we needed them. No word of a lie. For an entire month, I think it was 6 weeks, we kept seeing feathers come out of nowhere. Feathers.
It was very strange. We just kept seeing them. So it was like a synchronicity.
It was a sign.
Jung says, right? Synchronicity is serendipity. Like that's almost like the way that they tell you. You got to follow those synchronicities. And
yes,
it seems to lead to brighter paths. Anne-Marie Young says, too many people thinking they are better or more special. They forgot they are a small part of a much bigger picture.
That's right.
I would agree.
That's exactly right. And you got, I in what I'm doing, I'm thinking, don't get big-headed about this stuff. Yeah, you made some big discoveries here, but you know what? Stay humble, stay the course, keep communicating, keep telling the people, this information is important for everyone to have. Everybody needs anti-gravity. That's kind of the thrust of my work here now, is to bring anti-gravity in this world so we can have this beautiful technology, but it's going to connect us in powerful ways to a utopian society, because we're going to get to meet aliens, extraterrestrials. Once we have this technology, even the government's going to be hard-pressed to stop us from meeting them when we develop a faster-than-light spaceship and have it commercially available, not just for the government to play with, but for everyone to have. And it's very important. And the other thing I want to make very important is that science and spirituality are just two of the same things. And really, spirituality is above science. Science comes from the spiritual realm, from God, the creator. And NDE after NDE, I've heard so many of them now explicitly describe what is going on here, and how that the Father, the Creator, created everything. And from on my website, I have Father Rick Wendell, and he had a near-death experience, and he became a Catholic priest after his near-death experience. And God tells him while he's there, all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident. It is all intentioned by God. I really fully agree with that, since the theory of super relativity is an intelligent design theory. So we're kind of like in a matrix, you might say, or within the mind of God, and all this physical stuff is part of God. That's basically what they've been saying. It's not just Father Rick Wendell, it's others, Howard Storm. There's several others that I've read and listened to many NDEs looking for those kind of patterns. There's patterns of information there. It's very important for us to realize. It helps us to understand what the heck is really going on. So that's important.
Comment that you're, and our listeners may not know this, or watchers, that you really come from a scientific background, and that's kind of what you're known for. So we're going to talk about some really heavily scientific stuff. We kind of started on the other side, and we're going to bring it in because it's not the first thing you would expect a scientific mind like your own to come out with. And we say these things. Totally agree with you. I do think we're all one. I mean, how do you explain something like telepathy between people? Like we have an amazing telepathy between the two of us.
You call it chemistry and synchronicity, but
and we can pick colors and think about them, and the other person can tell you what that color is. We do this stuff. How do you explain these things, right? But it's right there. There's the evidence. We all seem to be connected.
Right. We're all in this consciousness, this God consciousness. And when you get to the other side, you really feel the connection much more powerfully when we're in the flesh. We pass through this veil of forgetfulness, and we're disconnected to a great extent. Not completely disconnected, but it's hard to make that connection to everybody is telepathically connected on the other side. Everybody knows everybody. It's just like, wow. And the knowledge that you have access to is essentially everything, because you're back connected to the God consciousness, and you're a part of that. We all are a part of that. And that's the things that, a lot of scientists now are beginning to find out, the ones that are stepping across that line that a lot of scientists don't want to do, the material world line of the scientific method and so forth. But a lot of people, the Greg Bradens and Stephen Greer's, people like that are saying, hey, there's more. And what are we doing? What are they doing? What am I doing? We're just basically saying, like Einstein once said, he said, I want to know how God created this world. I'm not interested in this or that phenomena or in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are just details. Basically, what I'm saying is here, if you want to know how something works, go to the creator of that something and ask him. That's always what I did as a troubleshooter in IBM. If a card assembly broke down or a program malfunctioned, I'd go to the creator, the writer of that program, or the creator of that electronic card assembly, and I ask him, how does this work? Tell me what's going on. And I get good information. It's just what we're going to do now. That's where we need to evolve to. And I'm saying, hey, I am sure there's an afterlife. I have been given enough personal evidence to be rock solid sure there's an afterlife, there's a God, and we need to stop sticking our heads in the sand about this, pull it up, acknowledge it, and start working with it. And there's a lot of people that are doing that. And I'm one of those people.
Yeah. I mean, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there, right? You can have a thermos
exactly
full of chicken soup, or it could be full of vodka, or it could be full of vodka and chicken soup. We don't really know till you drink it.
And scientists are really bad at not intuitively connecting to things they can't see. And that's starting with the ether and the abandonment of the ether, which was a colossal mistake that I address in my book. And I say how it happened, why it happened, and that we need to fix that problem, because obviously the ether does exist. And that leads to the completion.
Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that, by ether, and how we
Sure. Yeah, I'll link into, back before 1905, Einstein, Lorentz, Maxwell, Newton, just to name a few of the great scientists, all believed in a thing called the ether. And they weren't sure how it was configured, what its properties were and everything. And over the years there toward 1905, they were pretty sure it was a quasi-elastic solid. And the unified field theory definition really says this. electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. What I'm saying is that single fundamental field, it is the ether. That's the thing that the other forces are made from, this quasi-elastic solid. So what is that? What is a quasi-elastic? What does he mean by that? I mean, quasi, if you put a magnetic field out into space, you're bending space a certain way. It's actually being caused to rotate. When you remove that magnetic field from that free space, as soon as you remove it, it snaps back into a Euclidean flat space because the bending force is gone. That's quasi. It means when you put a force in, remove it, it snaps back into place. Elastic means that basically it can move in little stresses and tensions, but it doesn't. Space itself doesn't move like a particle moves through space. And I'll get to how that works a little later on. But the space itself is basically stationary, but it can be bent, twisted, counterclockwise, clockwise. It can be stretched, and it can be compressed. And that's where we get to solid. Solid, in its purest definition, means that which is continuous. And that's all it. So that material, outer space, what I'm talking about, is a real thing out there. It's a something. It's called the ether, or space, or the space-time continuum. Different words for the same exact thing. Unfortunately, in this time and date, most of scientists no longer believe in the ether because of an experiment that failed to detect it. But what I realized over quite some time of study was that experiment, the design was flawed. So they expected a result that experiment could never give because of the particle it was using to measure the ether drift or the ether wind. So I had to correct that. I said, "Oh, that's a mistake," but it got worse. After that, Einstein's, who was basing his theory of special relativity on an ether model, as was Lorentz, who made the Lorentz transformations that are completely composed of, special theory of relativity is the Lorentz transformations, was all based on an ether model. And at the last minute, in 1905, Michelson and Morley come out with an experiment and says, hey, we're looking through, we do this experiment, we're shining light back and forth at right angles, and we're measuring throughout the year. We want to detect the Earth's motion in the ether wind. But what they didn't realize, because they were using the photons, a photon is a special particle. And what's special about it, it always goes at the speed of light. And its motion is completely independent from anything that it's on, any emitting or receiving source. If you measure it at any time, it's always going to be this number. So it cannot detect the motion of the Earth within the ether, because no matter how fast the Earth is moving in this ether, it's not going to detect it because it's only going at one speed, and you're not going to get a plus and minus as if it were going through a wind. Like somebody throws a hard ball, it slows down because it has resistance, the air molecules. There's no resistance coming from the photon. Its photon motion, this is what I've discovered, comes from within itself, from its structure. It's a pressure wave. So it's moving through this material at its maximum speed, and it has no care about, if you're on the Earth moving 1,000 miles an hour and you emit it in this direction, it's not speed of light plus 1,000 miles an hour. It's the speed of light. And if you're moving the other way and you shoot that beam back in, it's not 1,000 miles an hour minus this, it's still the speed of light. That experiment could have never detected the ether, and nobody in that time really grasped that. And so they just said, oh, there's no ether wind, there's no ether, and let's move on. And that was a catastrophic shift. And Einstein put it in his paper, too. He basically said, you don't really need an ether for this, although deep down, he never really gave up on the idea. And in general relativity was proof that there really is an ether. And he comes out and makes a speech and says there is in 1920 in Leiden. He says, basically, Where does he say that? Recapitulating, we may say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with a physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, exists an ether. According to general theory of relativity, space without an ether is unthinkable. For in such space, there not only would be no propagation of light, but also no possibility for the existence for standards of space and time, measuring rods and clocks, nor therefore any space-time intervals in the physical sense. What he's saying is, the speed of light couldn't be a number if speed of light wasn't, if space were made of nothing, as much scientists say, many scientists in this day and time still say, it's an empty void made of nothing. If that were true, then answer me, why does it take 8.5 minutes for a photon or a beam of light to make it from the sun to here? If there was nothing out there between the sun and Earth, its value would be 0 for its distance. Mm-hmm. I'm not telling you magic here. This is common sense.
No, that means it's cutting through a certain kind of.
This means it's traversing through.
It's in space in a way, because there is something it has to cut through.
Yeah, it's traversing across something or within something. And the speed of light is finite. It has a certain value. Where did it get that from? Well, Maxwell answered that question. So I'm going to give you more evidence. C equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. Well, permittivity and permeabilities are properties of space. If space were equal to nothing, space would not have a measurable permittivity and permeability property, which has to do with the way the electrostatic field and the magnetic field develop and move through space. So basically, it gives an impedance to those two, to the electromagnetic device like a photon, which is what it is. So there's more evidence. Space has physical properties, which is what Einstein's saying here. And not only that, but those particles, the photon is a transverse waves. And we know, and Einstein said it himself, transverse waves only occur in solids. What did I say? The ether was a quasi-elastic solid. And evidence exists that it is, because all particles are transverse waves. So winding this all back up again and making sense of all of it, electromagnetism and gravity emerged as aspects of a single fundamental field. And I just gave you a lot of evidence supporting that he's right. The fundamental field is the ether. Magnetism is a rotation of space. The electrostatic field is a twist of space, either clockwise or counterclockwise. So that's what charge is. And when charge moves like this through space, space rotates. That's the magnetic field. And they know, thanks to Michael Faraday, that always magnetic fields occur only where there's moving charge. If you don't have moving charge, magnetic field isn't going to exist. So that's 2/3 of the unified field theory. All that was left to do was figure out how electromagnetic fields can be used to make gravity, which is a contraction of space. And that's the completion of unified field theory. And those, I have papers on the internet, ResearchGate, where I describe not only the model, but the mathematics that proves by predicting the mass of a neutron and a proton, which is fairly easy to do with the mathematics that I've used, which is Newtonian based, differential rank 2 tensors. This was fairly easy to do, and I'm shocked that it took this long for it to come about. But I've described how you can predict how mass is created. Therefore, I've described how gravity is created. So that's the unified field theory in a compressed explanation.
Oh, that's brilliant. And, a lot of people don't understand that there haven't been really good explanations for gravity, for magnetism. We know how to control it, or we assume or measure it more accurately when we're talking about gravity, mass, etc., creates more gravity. But they don't really know what it is. It's kind of like electricity. Like we know how to use electricity very, very well. But when you ask somebody, well, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
You get fuzzy, especially when they use quantum mechanics, because they'll try to tell you, well, particles don't really have a path. here's a probability cloud. They don't really have a position. You're thinking wrong. And and nobody's really, other than them, are buying that, because the more you drill into quantum mechanics and its interpretations, the less sense it makes. And so what are we talking about here? We're talking about a theory, a classical field theory, or quantum mechanics is going to be the solution for the theory of everything. Quantum mechanics is ill-suited to the task, because it gives you no physical explanation for how things work. There's no mechanics in quantum mechanics other than probabilities. And probabilities, the last time I checked, there's no such thing as a force of probability. Things don't happen because of probabilities. Probabilities happen because of deterministic forces and actions and interactions in every case. But trying to convince, this is part of my challenge, trying to break that paradigm back down and get them to realize the old guys were right. Einstein, Lorentz, and Maxwell, Newton, for God's sakes. These guys really had it right. They just didn't complete it all. And Einstein was very close to completing it all. He was just born too soon. If he had been born 50 years later, he would have done what I did in my papers, because I followed his path. And I knew of certain things that he didn't know about, which basically was the quarks inside of the neutron and proton. If he had that, he would have been able to complete the model that he was working on. But he had no idea that the neutron and the proton, they barely knew that those things existed when he died. And all he knew was they were somehow they have mass, but they're not moving. And according to my theory, they need to be moving somehow.
What are your thoughts on the double slit experiment?
Yes.
It has helped confuse the issue. It's actually, the solution can be described in two ways. They darn well know wave mechanics formulas can predict exactly the same thing that the quantum mechanics formulas do. The reason why the quantum mechanics work as well is that they're thanks to Schrodinger, and so the wave component of the particle is taken into consideration, and so its probabilities accurately display interference pattern when it goes through the double slits. But what also could explain it is self-interference. And so what I'm saying is this: when a particle shoots through the double slit experiment, you have to first tune the double slit experiment to a certain wavelength, which just happens to be very close to the wavelength of the thing you're shooting through there, so that the slits can't be too wide, or they can't be too narrow. They can't be too far apart. And the reason why that is, if you want to get the interference pattern, the particle has to self-interfere. And what happens is, since a particle is really more of a wave, it's a self-contained field. So you have to think of it as a very focused point that's spreading out. And in the case of particles, it's actually a vortex shape. And what happens when it goes through one slit, the other part of it goes through the other slit that's very close by. And so the electromagnetic field of the particle interacts with both slits, just like water going through two slits in a channel, and the waves come out and they interfere. That's the same thing that happens to a particle when it goes through the double slit. It's going through both slits. The main part goes through one, and then the outer field goes through the other. And when that happens, they're interfering. The electromagnetic fields of all the particles around the slits is interacting with that one particle, and it's bending it in various positions. Mm-hmm. But if you move that slit wider away, all of a sudden the interference problem disappears.
The thing that I find fascinating is that it changes upon observation. So when a conscious being seems to look at it, it behaves slightly differently.
It appears
like a wave.
It appears to do that because they change the experiment physically and how they observe it. But there's always that double split there. And I don't care how you time it, but if you were to put something in that area, then you would mess with the interference. So, and there's some cases, I want to be absolutely sure about this, but if you put a sensor in that area to see which hole it's going through, that sensor is going to interfere with the interference pattern because now it's there. So the problem is the apparatus itself affects the results. So, and they're interpreting that as we're looking at it, so it's making up its mind and doing this. The particle doesn't have any consciousness to do that. It's not making decisions. And when you start talking like that, you're going to start not making sense. Well, and if you break down,
it has something to do with that ether that you mentioned between the subject and the experiment. If something maybe in the ether changes. So I see Gail Hyson mentions she's done the double slit experiment. And I know about that experiment. She did that with Dean Radin, where they tried to focus. They had like people like Gail focusing on one part of that backboard. And it seemed to deviate to those parts or the opposite. It would go in the opposite direction, but it definitely changed course. So that makes me think there's something, and it's kind of getting back to what we were saying before about how we're connected and maybe the ether, looking for explanations too. Like, how does this stuff work, right?
Well, let me say this. If you focus on something, that means you got extra equipment looking at that. You can't observe something without affecting it. If you put extra equipment or you in any way look at a certain area, because you're interacting, if you put coils to detect it or anything that you do to physically change the experiment so that you can make an observation, you're affecting the thing that you're measuring. And so anytime they make changes to see, well, is it going to act like more like a particle like this or more like a wave? They're affecting the experiment, and the interpretation of what's happening is the mistake. It's not what's happening. It's not that, in my opinion, based on what I know about reality, and we could have great discussions about the double slit experiment and all the variations that they have done to try to see what's really going on. But the bottom line is, if they do a variation, they change the equipment. And if you change the equipment, if you put anything more to observe it, whatever is observing it, whatever equipment you put there to do this extra checking and sensing is affecting the particle in flight on the way to the target. So that's the problem. It's an observation problem that keeps making us think that somehow us looking at it is making it behave differently. No, it's us looking at it, applying a sensor or a force field that's engaging. You can't detect something unless you interact with it. And in the process of interacting with it, you change it. The more you interact with it, the more you change it. So unless they could come up with a totally passive system that wouldn't interact with the thing and it still would behave that way, then we got something interesting going on. But I'm pretty sure
it's a different experiment each time you add some kind of equipment, like you said, be it a person or even maybe intentions or a camera lens.
Intentions is what I was about to say, because our thoughts, as you know, they go out and they give energy into
a form of energy within itself, right. A power.
So if you're looking at something with our consciousness and not changing any apparatus or anything, and Gail Hyson could tell you this too, just by looking at it in our consciousness, it actually does something different, like Chris said.
Yeah, I think there's some experiments where they're doing that now at Princeton and some other areas. You definitely, consciousness can affect particles to some, and they're going to maybe make some sensors someday. Hey, from what I've heard from people who deal with ETs who have been abducted and stuff and worked with their technologies over there, the ET technology basically works with a a psychic interface. So their thoughts and are actually able to control the flight of the craft and also talking to the equipment, their display equipment, whatever. So that interface is coming. Even the U.S. Air Force has tried to do some stuff with helmets and strapping on wires and everything, reading the thoughts, the electrical impulses of the brain, basically, and using it to steer. So that's a real thing. I mean, how does spiritual realm affect things that are physical? Because they can do it. They can, you're talking, and I know somebody this happened to. They were talking about this person just passed and what they were going to do for their funeral, and they were going to not do something person asked for. And as soon as they said that, this picture got knocked off of the table, the picture of the person that just died. Well, that's kind of hell of a coincidence. So obviously they can affect physical things, and we have many videos of chairs moving across the floor. So there is an interface in the spiritual realm and the physical realm, definitely.
But we just don't perceive it. We perceive very little. But we do have tools that tend to measure things better than we can see, or what our senses give us. But when it comes to psychic energy, it's tough to measure.
And maybe some of that has to do with the double slit experiment. I don't know. I'd have to discuss the setup in high detail. I want to know how you laid out things, before I make a critical analysis. Because if you're changing things, the fact that you're changing things physically is going to affect that experiment.
Well, it speaks to quantum mechanics, and I just thought we would throw that out there as something to discuss.
We actually have a Faraday bag.
We do.
We do.
We use it with our radio.
Yeah.
Stuart Hallett has a question, babe.
Okay.
He has a question about, can air gravity pull in an asteroid? I think is what he's saying. So the gravity of the Earth. I would think
the gravity of, sure, if it comes close enough to the Earth, the gravitational field will affect its course. There's a geometry involved along with the force of gravity. And and that's a real threat. And I discuss how to avert that threat in my book. And that's another reason why we need anti-gravity technology, because we could build drones. Well, once we detect the system, an incoming asteroid or something, we could send the drones out there, hundreds of them, and they just land on the surface and they all push together this thing out of the way. No explosions, none of that nonsense. You just use the anti-gravity force, the propulsion force, to push the thing out of the way, push it toward the sun, whatever. So we get a deflection system put in place. This could be very easily done once we develop the anti-gravity technology.
And you think that would be based on magnetism?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Opposing magnets, like when you put two magnets together, and you have them opposed, they're pushing away from each other, that sort of thing? Or
It's a little different than the opposing magnet, the two like poles. Magnetism, the thing to understand is how I linked it to anti-gravity is and electrostatic fields can create the same effect. They're a little more difficult to control. But what you need to do, since we've established, or I have established, that gravity is caused by the accelerated motion of fundamental unbalanced charges. When they move in these kind of circular patterns, that's an acceleration. And when that happens, when a particle moves like this, accelerated manner, it causes a contraction in and around that particle or at the perimeter of its orbit. And that's the case with the quarks inside of the neutron and the proton. Very simple explanation I give. So those things cause them to have mass and gravity, and that's a contraction of space. So with magnetism, magnetism happens as charge moves through space, and charge is an inversion, a twist, a vortex, just like Maxwell thought it was. And when that happens, the space is rotating around it as it's twisting and moving through space. So space is doing this. And when you do that kind of rotation, space is forced to stretch apart. And to give you a real world example, just get a piece of a silly putty, smack it down on a comic book and lift it up, look at the picture, and then twist the picture. Watch what happens when you twist the silly putty. The picture stretches, and that's basically a quasi-elastic solid. So now you can see what's happening to space when a magnetic field occurs, which is a torsional reaction to moving charge. You can use that to create a secondary field, because as the magnetic field is doing this, it's twisting. Space is coming wider apart. It's actually expanding in that area. So you have a reverse effect. You have space expanding where a magnetic field is. So this is how you can create propulsion and block a gravitational pull on your spacecraft. Like the many spacecrafts you see the cylindrical shape. Mm-hmm. And I wondered that for years. Why that shape? But if you see it's usually a mothership. That's for deep space travel, because that's shape is perfect for creating a gravitational field. You basically, what you have is coils from the front of the ship going around the ship. 1, 2, and you can actually see this in some UFO video. I have a video where you can see that as the coils are turning on and off and sweeping across, the ship will move this way, or sweeping across and the ship will move that way. What you got is a series of magnetic coils in parallel that are, one is turning on, then the next one is turning on even stronger, then the next one is, and then the one in the back is the strongest, creates an outward bubble that forces the ship forward. Wow. It's a simple design. It's highly efficient, but it does more than just create an anti-gravity field. It cancels inertia. So what do I mean by that? I mean, inside of the ship, this magnetic field isolates you from the ether, basically. And what they do is they have shielding, magnetic shielding inside to protect the occupants, because these kind of magnetic fields can hurt you. So you have to have, unfortunately, just so happens that we can shield magnetic fields. So you put that in place so the occupants get the benefits of the twisting of space, this rotation and this expanded field, which I call the inverse hyperbolic field. And they don't have inertia. So when they're moving in this bubble, which I call the slip wave, mm-hmm. they're just basically floating in the ship. And the ship and they can move at ridiculous accelerations without feeling the acceleration. Because if you don't do this and you accelerate, you die. You can't go from 10,000 miles an hour and make a right turn and survive that. Right. You won't. And our jets prove that. And there's no pressure chute that's going to help you. You're gonna die. You're gonna turn into mush. And they conquered that problem by using the slip wave, the spatial bias drive, what I call the slip wave field, and it modifies or biases the ether. So not only do you get propulsion because it's expanding in the back end of the ship, mm-hmm. pushing you like a bubble through water, and you also you get rid of the inertia problem. And most importantly, if you're going to twist space and you're going to stretch it, you're going to affect things that Maxwell said space has, the properties of permittivity and permeability. If you reduce those, which a magnetic field will do, if you reduce those two properties, now you could break the light speed barrier. All these benefits, all these bonuses come from using the magnetic field for generating the anti-gravity field. And once you reduce, so within your sphere, your tube shape or your cigar shaped ship, you have the space within it, permittivity and permeability drop. Now that ship and everything in it can go any speed it wants beyond the speed of light. 10 times the speed of light, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000. And to back that up to what I just said, material scientists have developed something called metamaterials, which a lot of people have noticed are inside of UFOs. The actual metal thing seems to be made of a metamaterial. The reason why metamaterials are so important is that our scientists have discovered, if you configure these things right, you can reduce permittivity and permeability. And when they shine light through it, they say that that light is moving infinitely fast. If you reduce permittivity and permeability to 0, if you execute that number into the equations, you'll find that the speed of light goes to infinity. Perfect. That's just what we need to build a starship. Now we have all the knowledge, everything necessary to do this. All we have to do is prove that anti-gravity exists, and I'm moving in that direction right now.
That's amazing.
Fascinating. Now, you cover this for a little bit halfway through the show in your book, Master Reality. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, I go into high detail. I'd link all the things from the past. Thanks to the internet and years of research and thinking about it, I spent many nights from 2 to 5 in the morning working on mind experiments, looking at visualizing space, seeing how it bends and curves when you apply fields to it, and realizing that this world, this reality, was never about particle-to-particle interactions, as quantum mechanics says. It's always been about particle-to-space interactions. Moving particles are what's used to generate the magnetic field and to generate the gravitational field. The electrostatic field is simply a twist of space, which apparently was created at the beginning by God. And so these inversions of space cannot be undone. They cannot be destroyed. And all of our experiments have proven that statement to be correct. You cannot get rid of an electrostatic charge by colliding it or whatever you try to do to it. It always is there. You may transform it by a very hard collision, but that winding, that's important. That winding, that twisting of space, that vortex shape cannot be destroyed, because if it could, this universe would die like that. And that's part of the design, the intelligent design put in place by the creator.
Would it be okay to play your book trailer now?
Yeah, go ahead.
You mind? Okay. This is for Master of Reality.
I didn't know what to expect.
Close it there. Let me just take that out of there. Oops.
What'd you do?
There it is. Sorry. You know what? I apologize, Mark. I thought the trailer was only about 20 seconds long. Then I realized it was a bit longer, but it's an awesome trailer. And
thanks. I had help with it. Yeah, I had help with that from a guy who's an expert in Final Cut Pro. And I got all the graphics. I put these things in, make him do this and do that. And he did all that and made all that magic.
Oh,
That
that's
was
cool.
just
Very
awesome.
cool. Very cool. And that
Yeah.
book is on Amazon right now. If people want to seek that out, I put a link in our ticker there, but I think it's probably easier just to go out to Amazon and search for Mark Fiorentino.
Yeah, I uploaded the trailer some time ago. I'm glad to see people are looking at it. It was fun making that. It's in this book, the power, the knowledge, the information is just almost off scale. There's at least 6 Nobel Prize worthy ideas. The slip wave, the discovery of the slip wave, discovery of anti-gravity, how to make it, the discovery of the origin of mass gravity inertia. It's really huge. It's a big deal. And the challenge I got is that I'm coming from way out in left field. And how do I get physicists to wake up and say, hey, this actually makes sense? And he has the math to back it up. Maybe we should take this seriously. And that's the ultimate challenge I got going right now, how to pull that off.
Right. I got a question out in the audience from Ken Sean. He asks, I once saw a disc-shaped UFO with a revolving multicolored light around its circumference, except for an empty or black section where a colored light would be. Could this indicate something?
Well, it depends on the designers, and are they doing that rotation to demonstrate the magnets going on? And a circular or a disc shape, I imagine that there are a set of magnets underneath, one right next to each other, going all the way around. And so what you do when you have that configuration, that disc shape configuration, one set of magnets on one end, it turns on to a certain degree, and then the other end, they really turn on hard, and it goes in that direction. But they can instantaneously change the configuration and make it go this way or that way by which magnets they're turning on and turning off, or not turning off, but turning the power down on one end. So when you see this mode, if you see lights going around like this, that's the hover mode. So what they got to do in order to keep the craft steady, they just sweep around, zoom, 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 zoom. And what do we see when an actual craft lands in a field? You see either a clockwise or a counterclockwise laying down of the weed or the grass or whatever, and the grass is magnetized. I read a report from Project Blue Book, I think. It was one of those UFO books where the investigator, the Air Force investigator, brought out a magnometer with him to the landing site. Well, gee, why would you bring a magnometer to a UFO landing site? You must already know something, because that's going to measure magnetic fields. That's what a magnometer does. So they go out there and they measure the grass, and it's magnetized. I got news for you. It takes a lot of magnetic field strength to do that.
Reminds me a little of the Falcon Lake incident in Canada. I don't know if it was magnetism they detected or atomic energy, but that was interesting. It was metal actually melted into the rocks, into the cracks of the rocks.
Yeah, you have to be really careful with magnetic resonant fields. If you don't believe me, ask the people who are on the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, yes.
They had matter becomes a little bit mushy if you're doing this wrong, and you're too close to it. Especially metal, it could deform the metal.
And in us, and we mesh or meld into it.
There's a lot of that's what happened in the Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah.
Some of the people actually dropped into the bulkhead and stuff, and I'm sure that was a miserable. So you really don't want to be underneath one when it's doing that. It could really make you sick or kill you. I wouldn't want to be underneath it. But again, they can use magnetic shielding. So there's two kinds of magnetic shielding, reflective and the ones that absorb the lines into the metal. If you use a combination of that, you could be sitting above those magnets within only a few feet and not feel a thing. Perfect. That's just what we need to build the starship. The creator thought of everything. We need to be able to get off this planet because someday it's going to die. And if we're still here, we'll die with it. So if we don't, every day that we wait, we don't develop this technology, we don't get the ability to leave, we're in jeopardy. So what I'm saying is time to do this, to push this forward. I'm working on that in every way I can think of to establish that anti-gravity exists and get moving. So
the way this works in ufology, though, as you were saying, and a saucer, it would be around the perimeter of a saucer, and it would move in a circular fashion. So
actually, the magnets are going from underneath the center of imagine it's a disc at the center of the disc. You got, way I envision it, now there's probably more than one way to do it. You could put some around the perimeter too, definitely. I don't really think you need them along the top, but maybe they do that. I don't know. But definitely underneath, and then you could use perimeter, what I call steering coils. And you turn these things on in certain combinations, and you see in a lot of these UFOs, they're flying through space, through the air at, several hundred miles an hour, 1,000 miles an hour, and they're not even lined up in a way that's aerodynamic. They're at angles like this going through space, or like this, or they flip. You can't do that with, you're just spinning magnets on a disc or something. You have to, it's all got to be electronic. You have to have the coils set up. And then you could, with a computer control, you could play around and make all kinds of funky maneuvers and still be moving in the same direction. And that's what we see happening. So that tells me they're using electromagnets, and they're probably using superconducting coils that they have developed that either we haven't, I think we have, and it's been classified because I don't think you can do it with the regular electromagnets. I think you really need superconducting coils or wire to really get the field strength you need to get. Mm-hmm. But that's things we need to determine by experiment. And that's what I'm going to move toward in my next phase, doing these experiments to determine how much magnetic field strength is necessary to get to that knee on the graph where gravity starts to drop off and anti-gravity starts to kick in. And there's work to be done. And I'm encouraging people to do it. And if they don't do it, I'm going to do it.
There you go. You go, Mark.
You do it. Yep. You can tell us about it. And the cigar-shaped UFOs, that would be more the cylindrical and the cylindrical ring.
It's such a simple, safe design because you can't have anything protruding, like Star Trek. You got these big things going out the back and a disc. The thing, that's never going to work unless you got coils all over the place, and they better be synchronized in such a way because you have to affect the permittivity and permeability all the same throughout the whole ship, or you might get inertia. And if you get hit with inertia at 10 times the speed of light, you're dead. And you create a black hole. And bad things happen. So to safely encompass the ship inside of the slip wave, a simple cylindrical shape is the easiest design. You could do a sphere, you could do a triangle, you can do a disc, but for deep space travel, most of the time they're going to use that cigar shape because that is so easy to protect. Because you do not want to drop out of the slip wave once you're moving at a significant rate, near the speed of light or beyond. It's lethal. It's extremely dangerous. And you have to have redundant systems, and you got to make sure the current in those coils never drops. Because if you drop the current in the coil at 10 times the speed of light, that ship is gone. Everybody's dead in an instant, and there's no talking to Scotty and saying, Scotty, we have a problem. It's over. Right. It's all over. and then you wind up drifting through space at just below the speed of light as a compressed piece of metal, flat as a pancake, and that's not going to make anybody happy. So
those electronics are made in Japan, like our car electronics that seem to be so reliable, right?
Oh no, this stuff is dangerous, and if you want to do deep space travel, you better have at least triple redundancy.
What do you think of the Tic Tacs? And it's almost a hybrid between the two, right?
Oh, I found something really good on Google Maps with that. I have to get the coordinates.
Yeah, that's amazing, those Tic Tacs. But, they're saying just what I'm saying, that they've conquered inertial. That's a big problem when you're making UFOs. You can't have inertial leakage. It's even like a little strip of it going through your ship where the magnetic field isn't really cause that space to stretch out. Because if you walk into that region during a high-speed maneuver, that part of your body will feel the inertial stress, and the blood will stop and coagulate, and muscles will strain, bones will snap.
Sure.
It's not good. You really have to know what you're doing when you design one of these spaceships, and I would like to help do that someday.
I have so many questions for you right now before you do that. One of them is, do you think that these ships, some of these can be sentient themselves and not have occupants in them?
You just mean like autonomous drones of some sort?
Or maybe even holding a consciousness.
Yes.
Or having a consciousness. Yes. I hear tell that a lot of them are part biological.
Yes.
So we're talking about a technology is beyond anything. I'm talking about an emerging civilization technology. When you graduate to interstellar travel, this is the first design you use. But people that are millions of years ahead of us, they've got stuff that is just like godlike, their capabilities. I heard of this one person that I talked to who's had many abductions, but it's a person who doesn't look at them as a horrible thing. They're going for training. The aliens are friendly, and we're hearing more and more of that now. But this person said they needed to bring her back home, but they were on the other side of the planet. So he says, we're going to take a shortcut. And they configured the ship. They see this vortex thing, the spinning thing on the screen, and they drove right through the planet.
You mean they burrowed through the planet?
No. Somehow they went into like another dimension or something, so that their physical, and I don't know. I mean, I can think of 3 or 4 different ways this might have worked. Somehow the atoms, in the ship were somehow expandable, and the particles just went next to each other, or they went into a dimension, some other dimension that's parallel to the physical dimension we're in, and they zip through and they come out the other side. How do you do that? I mean, that's what they're claiming. And that's even guys like Whitley Strieber saying they come right through my walls when they come in the house. Yeah. They come right through the window, and they take me out through the window.
A bit like ghosts, right? Paranormal phenomena.
Well, when we humans we're barely above the apes, really, with making sticks and tools and simple things, see stuff like this, it's quite shocking to the system, because this is beyond anything. We've never built anything that can do that. We don't even have an idea how that works at the molecular level. And these guys do it like it's nothing. And so there could be a ship that's alive, that some beings evolved to the point where they just live in outer space. And, there's any number of possibilities out there. What I can tell you for sure is we only know our percentage of knowledge and experience is 0.000 trillions of zeros, 1 to what's actually out there. There's so much more than we could ever imagine. there's out there that we know nothing of what's out there.
Imagine the idea that a drone, is a projection of consciousness itself, and it really doesn't. It can move as if the way light moves.
Yeah, some of these people don't even use the technology I'm talking about. They use interdimensional technology. They go through stargates, and that's a really efficient way to get around. And the rumor has it we have that technology. The U.S. actually has developed that technology as well. And I talk about how I think a Stargate will be built or can be built in this world right now. And I use the metamaterials again.
Nice.
That's
fascinating.
In your book.
Yeah, there's a chapter for Stargates. I wasn't going to put it in, but I was told I should put that in, because I didn't know that much about it. So I studied up on it, and I went on some clues that were given to me. Those clues checked out, and I discovered metamaterials, and I discovered what they can do. The only thing I knew when I started writing the Stargate chapter is I knew in order for you to open up a dimensional portal, something is going to have to move faster than the speed of light. That's how I started. And I say that right in the beginning of the chapter. In order for this to work, we're going to find out together as I write this chapter. And I know this one thing for sure. Something has to go faster than the speed of light, because you have to create an EMP pulse, electromagnetic pulse, that's at a frequency that is extremely high. If you want to you have to tune the space around this within the Stargate frame. You have to tune it by compressing the electromagnetic pulses to frequencies that are well beyond anything that we've ever created before. And the only way to do that is to use metamaterial. Whereas you can, as they have claimed on ResearchGate, they're able to shine light through this material and accelerates to beyond the speed of light. Wow. They say infinitely fast. But that's the material you need to build a Stargate.
So what are those metamaterials? Where does that come from?
There's a configuration. I'm not an expert in metamaterials. I only took a little time. All I needed to know is they existed and they had this effect. But they configure it in such a way that there's like, what do you call it? There's structures within material that electromagnetically cause the permittivity and permeability to drop. You could read about them on
it's ResearchGate. Is that what you call it?
ResearchGate, and you look up metamaterial, or you can look up articles. People claim infinitely fast.
Fascinating. Such a defining part of our science, right? Like nothing can go faster than the speed of light.
Well, you got all the regular physicists are out there getting mad when they read stuff like this. That can't be. That can't be. They're wrong. Well, they seem to be able to measure it somehow, and they designed the materials to reduce permittivity and permeability. They figured out how to do that. Very clever. And if they truly have done that, then if you shine light in that thing, by Maxwell's equation, that light is going, if they reduced it just 1/2 even, that light is going to go much faster than the speed of light. And it all makes sense. It's just a matter of getting people to open their minds a little bit and say, oh, hey, that actually makes sense. But they're so stuck on the idea that the speed of light is a constant. It's like blasphemy to go to a regular physicist and say the speed of light is not constant.
Great Koth asks, Mark, do you think they have involved a gyroscope? Do you think a gyroscope is involved in any of these ufology, UAP phenomena we see?
It's possible as an intermediate technology or for guidance help, but a gyroscope in an anti-gravity field, it's not going to work too well because it depends on, inertia and you eliminate it. But there's a gyroscopic effect. If the disc shaped ones, if it's like you're doing this, you're scanning at the bottom of the ship, you imagine the disc down there and you're vroom, vroom, vroom. So there's kind of, you can think of that as a gyroscopic effect, but you're using a magnetic field and not a thing of mass to spin around. So I don't know. I don't know all the different technologies that are used. I know of a person, I can't say their name, I will never say their name, who saw a up-close UFO back in the 70s. They got close enough to touch it. And they saw on that, two people, they saw on the ship written, U.S. Air Force experimental. And why I'm bringing this up is they claim they heard something spinning around, like it sounded like a bowling ball going around and around. There's a gyroscopic effect. Something is going around and around in a circle in there, but I don't know what it was. So gyroscopes might be involved somehow in some way that, but I would think they have magnetic fields installed in these gyroscopes.
Yeah, that's cool. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
that's what they thought about that Falcon Lake incident as well in Canada. That
and a
was
few other
some
ones.
kind of U.S. military experiment. A guy got pretty injured by it. He had all these prints. He tried to walk into it. He was close enough, and it shot like it was chemicals or hot air, but it put dots all over his torso, and he was hospitalized. And that's the same one where they saw the melted metal. It was extremely hot. Whatever was going on with it.
Yeah, because you're affecting the speed of light is affected by magnetism. They're going to find that out eventually. How do I know that? When I worked on all this stuff, I says, wait a minute, the speed of light isn't constant. And here's some evidence this guy found that it was slowing down, which is being covered up by the physicists. They ignore it. But then you should be able to speed it up too. And the way I figured out how to do is magnetic field. Well, so then I started looking for experiment. Hey, I wonder if anybody bothered to try to measure the speed of light in a magnetic field. And sure enough, they did. It's called a birefringence measurement. And which means when light goes through a material, medium, it bends and breaks into two beams. And, sure enough, they're trying to prove a quantum mechanics theory that says when you shine a beam of light in a magnetic field, they say it slows down. So I went and started looking for these experiments. I says, I bet you they don't find that because according to my theory, it should speed up. So I go around and I find this guy in Germany that writes about these experiments, and they keep failing. And in one case, the birefringence measurement was negative, which means the speed of light is faster. And they were shocked. And so they wrote up the report, but then got scared because you could get fired for saying the speed of light is not constant.
Yeah, I could see that.
So they pulled back the report and withdrew it. And then they tore the experiment apart and they gave up. And over the years, they keep doing this experiment, and it's being done in France right now. I wrote them, and I asked them, did you ever get a measurement that's negative, birefringence measurement? And then I got a big speech where we don't do that. We expect the speed of light to remain constant and in a magnet. So therefore, according to quantum chromodynamics or whatever, we expect the speed of light to slow down. But every time they do the experiment, it doesn't confirm. And so they tear it apart and they rebuild it over and over. And they've done this for over 70 years. They refuse to accept that the speed of light is speeding up. It's certainly not slowing down. And they think it's the equipment. There's something wrong with the equipment. So, I can't get them to admit. And I think that, look what happened when they did the faster than light neutrino bungle. That the people lost their jobs because they were claiming that the neutrinos were going faster than the speed of light. But they finally found a mistake. It was an equipment problem. And those poor people, including the boss, they all got canned over a mistake, which I think was kind of harsh, but
yeah, absolutely.
Good, very. That is a little harsh, but I can see where it's such a standard that it would upset the higher ups, right? Somebody would be upset about this.
Yeah. So you got to be careful. So when you find something like this, as people have done in the past with anti-gravity and so forth, Byfield Brown and some of these other folks, they're just saying, oh, that's not right. That's not causing that anti-gravity field. That's not causing lift. That's ionic transfer. That's ionic beams. They come up with an excuse. Oh, it's air currents. It's, they'll do anything but accept that it could be the truth. So we're going to have to, the free people of the world, or and the people who have discovered anti-gravity, like Poklanoff and Ling Ni, I think is her name. These people just get bought off or ignored, or in some cases they get destroyed by the mechanism that's there to discredit them. Do whatever it takes to get people to ignore what they've discovered.
And into the military, or deep science there. Gajini mentioned about the military doing more
that's
creation of UFOs than people think, not just Americans either.
Anti-gravity and aliens is our biggest secret. It's a top secret that they need to keep quiet as long as they can, until at some point they'll probably claim that aliens are enemies, and then
I hope not.
Well, how would the industrial complex there that makes weapons, they got to have an enemy.
Oh, that's true too.
If you don't have an enemy, why are they there?
Weapons, and we spend something. What is it?
So either we're going to claim somebody else is an enemy, or they're
industrial complex.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. True. It's most of our taxes.
Actually, Stephen Hawking had said not to trust, if we ever were to have like an invasion or anything, not to trust these ETs, whatever they are. And I remember it was like one of the last things he said. I'm like, wow, really? You don't want that? It was when Umo, that comet came by. Yeah.
It is fascinating because a lot of the things that people report back that have had alien abduction phenomena occur to them is that it was a positive message. All right. And that's another thing that we talk about a lot. And, like Whitley and other folks, but there's a certain percentage that say otherwise, albeit small. Their experiences are fairly horrifying. And it's almost like the narrative has to be with a positive message out there. We wonder about that. I know our friend Nathaniel talks a lot about that. It drives him nuts that people always say that it's a good or a positive experience because we don't really know what we're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's scary. I mean, let's face it. If they come in your bedroom at night and you've never seen them before, and they can do things and they look so strange, and you're stuck to having a normal world, what you think is normal, and then all of a sudden this something out of the blue comes. It's pretty horrifying the first time it happens, and especially if they're only interested in your
something horrifying.
Genetics or biology, and they're sticking probes into you and everything, and not saying much, and then they drop you off, and they're using you for to make babies or whatever, and and they just don't really engage with you that much. I'm sure it's horrifying, but it seems like there's also a crew, that a bunch of people that they're actively training, and they're providing classes, showing them how to do things psychically, which is, we're evolving psychically whether we want to or not. Each generation is becoming more and more psychic.
I agree.
And so
that aspect of it, and they what Ray Hernandez calls the contact modalities, where you come back and you have maybe some sort of enhanced psychic ability or experience, whether it's something like astral projection or telepathy. They seem to have an increased ability from the experience, and that is fascinating. One thing we noticed is the more we do this, the better that gets, right? And ourselves, and we haven't been abducted by aliens to our knowledge
that we know of. Sometimes we'll put it out there,
but it seems to increase in strange and weird ways. And I find that fascinating. Maybe that veil is just getting thinner overall.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. This is an exciting time. This is a time of great adventure, and I just hope that somehow I can weave my way through this in a peaceful manner and help our technology advance so that we can get to that utopian future. That's a possibility, not guaranteed. That's what makes this all kind of scary. If we go too far south, things could get bad. There's also futures that are possible that many NDEs have said are very awful. It's a battle going on. There's a war between good and evil here happening here on Earth right now.
Yes.
Spiritual warfare.
Yeah, and it's spilling over from the other side is what I'm hearing. And, there's the people that are working, that have come here to help out and help avert that bad ending, which I sure don't want to have happen. But I don't know how this is going to turn out. It's an adventure.
It certainly is.
We need you. We need you. You need other people to.
I need a bunch of people. I don't think I could do this by myself, but we need
we got a few people
in
army. In chat already to sign up.
Well, you guys are you're helping by doing these kind of shows. It's a big help.
We'd love to help you. Yes,
we like to spread the message for sure.
Absolutely.
And
definitely,
it's amazing because we get to. It's a pleasure for us. We get to learn from all our guests like yourself, and
so much.
Hear different viewpoints and ideas, new, fresh ideas that are just great. They're everywhere.
Well, there's a lot of people who love this stuff. I love this stuff. I've always loved the paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, you name it. Most of that, anything mysterious, because I want to solve it. I want to figure that out.
Yes.
What happens if a ghost falls into a black hole?
I've actually wondered that.
Yeah, you talk a lot about black holes. Maybe.
I think, is it safe? Can we get out of there? I hope so. I heard of one case where an NDE person tried to go into the sun, and as they went into it, there was like shield, and he bounced off and went back. So there may be some spiritual protection against that. Maybe that can affect you. So don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
What do you think? I saw some news story and I didn't click on it, and I'll admit wholeheartedly here, this is on my Facebook feed, so its validity may be questionable. However, it did mention about a black hole spewing some kind of gas or something. It's something that recently happened in the news. Did you see anything about that, or is that even possible?
Yeah, they're called quasars, and they're at the very fringe of the universe. And I talk about black holes, quasars, in great detail in my book. My theory is radically different than current theory. Oh, what a surprise. My theory is that black holes are really made of neutronium. And what's neutronium? Neutronium is just tightly packed neutrons. Neutrons are stable as long as they're next to each other, or protons inside of elements, inside of molecules, and so forth. But if you take a neutron and you take it and you single one and you put it into outer space by itself, in 15 minutes it turns basically into a proton and electron. It decays. Strange thing that. Why did the good Lord do that? I thought about that for years because I don't think that's an accident. That needed to happen. So I developed a theory that when stars blow up, they either leave behind a neutron star or a black hole. And so I said, wait a minute. Why would an explosion make a highly dense object? Usually when you blow something up, it just flies apart. There's no kind of a big giant thing in the middle after it blows up. Well, maybe it's because no, stop. How about this idea? How about it was there already from the very beginning? So what I'm saying is, and what I say in my book, it's one of my biggest predictions, the sun has a neutronium core. All stars have neutronium cores. It's the way they are formed. If you don't have a heavy gravitational source, you can't possibly cause hydrogen gas free floating in outer space. Well, there's absolutely no pressure to bring it together. Hydrogen is a proton and electron, and the electromagnetic repulsive force of those particles from one another is orders of magnitude stronger than the gravitational force that they put out. So explain to me how hydrogen gas is going to come together when its push-away force is order of magnitudes greater than its attractive force. There's no explanation that makes sense, yet that's what we believe right now. My theory is that all stars and planets have neutronium cores, and that is what attracts the gas and spinning and rotating rapidly, which is necessary so that the space twists, as it's called frame dragging. Einstein said this was true. It's been proven true. We know it. And so what these neutronium cores do is when they go through a hydrogen cloud, they gather all the gas up, and pretty soon you can't see the neutronium core or the black hole core because you got this gas spinning around it, and as it gets compressed, fusion process starts because this gravitational field is huge, strong enough to compress that hydrogen to the point where fusion kicks in and a star is born. Now, that theory of star formation makes sense versus what we have now, which is somehow the gas comes together. We don't know exactly how that happens, but it seems to happen because we see all these stars out there. And so where did all the neutronium cores come from? One very large black hole that was what we call the cosmic egg. And when that blew up at the beginning of our universal cycle, which I have a feeling has been going on for eons and eons, it was composed of a highly packed neutronium. And so when this neutronium goes out, there was great amounts of neutron gas with all sizes of neutronium spheres coming out of this Big Bang. And that's just what you need, because these neutronium spheres are the seeds of life. They're going to create, from these spheres, we're going to create galaxies, we're going to create stars. And within 15 minutes of the Big Bang, all that neutron gas, is going to convert to a proton and electron. Perfect. That's just what we need to form hydrogen and make stars. The whole theory makes absolute sense. So what I'm saying is that's where black holes are. They're just nothing but dense neutronium cores. And if you go to a certain density, then the gravitational field becomes so strong, light cannot escape it. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Got a phone call.
Yeah.
That actually makes
probably spam.
Probably.
It's
it
spam.
Actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, well, we could prove, all we got to do is prove the sun's got a solid core. And there's an I looked it up. So on a good old internet, I says, hey, let's go to NASA and see. And they do a measurement called a tackle line experiment. And if you look that up, you'll see it's like a chart with lines going in, and then they sort of merge into a single line. And well, what does that mean? Well, what they're doing is, I guess they're shooting radar into the sun's surface, and they're seeing how the gas moves. Because you notice the gas is rotating around because there must be something underneath causing a frame dragging, which causes the gas to move. Why else would it just start to orbit around something like the Earth? The atmosphere goes along with the Earth. As it spins around, so does the atmosphere. Well, the sun's atmosphere is spinning around, and it's at a different rate than the center, the core. That's going a lot faster. And as you go in, it becomes, the gases start not moving at a different rate. They start moving as one, as if it were solid. And the further you go in and you look at this chart, this line flattens out and it says it's rock solid. There's something solid in there, but yet nobody wants to interpret that and say, I bet you there's a solid core in the sun. Nobody wants to go out on that limb because that's not the current theory. current theory, there's nothing but hydrogen in the sun, and that's all there is. It's just really packed, and we don't know how it could hold itself together, because there's like billions and billions of atom bombs going off every second. You would think that would shove it out, but the gravitational field is so strong, it holds the atmosphere in place. The only way that could make sense is that there is something powerfully strong and solid at the center of each star that holds it together. And when you have one that blows up, it's because that core isn't large enough to withstand as you burn through the elements, as you get fusion to helium, to hydrogen, to helium, to carbon, it burns hotter. And the hotter it burns, then the pressure going out becomes greater. Eventually, they get to an element where the fusion is so ferociously vicious, it blows out the star. The neutronium core can't hold it. And every time that happens, what's left? A neutron star, because it was there the whole time.
That makes so much sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
God.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, all we got to do is interpret things properly and say, hey, that does make sense. And I'm trying to get to an astrophysicist to throw that theory in front of them and see what they have to say. I know they're going to resist it because, well, that's not our theory. That's a theory. The stars just come together somehow.
Right.
Explain to me how that happens.
A random event or something. Yeah, it doesn't seem too random.
The cloud just comes together by itself.
Yeah. There's a place in New Mexico called Sunspot. Have you ever heard of that? I believe it's right now in the University of New Mexico, but I'm not quite sure.
Oh, where they have the solar telescope?
Yeah. I went in there when I was a kid back in, the 70s. And the public wasn't allowed to go in there at that time, but my uncle worked for the Air Force and they let us in. And I remember all these little boxes of the sun and what they're trying to do and figure out and everything. And that was back in the 70s. So
it's not that long. I mean, it's not like he rode in like on horseback or anything.
No, but it was so far away from right now. But yeah, it just, if anybody else has heard about Sunspot as well, and they do have, just like you were saying about NASA, and I think that's where NASA gets their information from. They
watch the sun all the time.
They do.
Because the sun could do some seriously bad things to a solar spot. Sunspots can shoot off, eject.
Yeah.
That could really create havoc. And there's another piece of evidence. How come the only place where we get these ejections are a sunspot's really kind of like a magnetic storm? Ooh, magnetism is in. Somehow there's like an ion channel forming within the gases somehow, where there's this tremendous magnetic field. And you can actually see the lines in it as the stuff is ejected. They're following the lines. Somehow in that area, particles can leave the atmosphere where there's a magnetic field. So why is that possible? My opinion is the magnetic field is weakening the gravitational field. So they're able to be ejected from those regions because there's an intense magnetic field there. Again, demonstrating evidence that magnetism can affect the gravitational field. If the magnetic field is strong enough, it could shield, it can block the gravitational field. So where there's all this explosion activity and all this heat, then all of a sudden they can be ejected from these areas where there's a strong magnetic field. Breaks down the gravitational field so the particles can be ejected from these areas. This is evidence that's just out there, throwing out a pattern that's subtle, but it's there. And it's just a matter of proper interpretation to get this thing going here and to realize what's really happening in our universe. And I hope to God somehow I can get this stuff through.
We hope so too.
And difference on us and our audience.
Definitely.
Robert Riggy says Sunspot is now open to the public, reservation only.
Excellent.
Kristen. And Greg Koss says, this 2 weeks in a row that with all this info, my head is going to explode. This Mark is unbelievable. He's enjoying the show. And we're enjoying it. And then
we love you.
we come down to to close of it, I want to make sure people know how to get your books and they can find out more. Where can they find you?
Sure. My book is at my website. You can buy a signed copy there, or you can go to Amazon. My website is www.super-relativity.com, super-relativity.com. And there's a bunch of buttons right on the front page. You just click one of those. It goes to the book at Amazon, goes to the book, the ebook on Amazon, goes to where you could buy the book from my site. I got a blog there. I got some videos there. I got a lot of interesting stuff that you can, some of these questions that you've asked tonight are on my blog, and I try to put new ones. Oh, I also put my research paper up there now. I just uploaded that. It's 50 pages long. It's a little long, but it's loaded with evidence layman can understand, proving the ether, proving how force works, which is nothing more than magnetic fields or bendings of space, certain types of bendings of space. It's all there. It's fun. You could browse around or whatever, but that's the two places where you can get my book right now.
Fantastic. I love the idea of an autographed copy because that's a little something personalized.
Yes.
Makes a great gift.
Well, if I'm right, and I think I'm right here, that book is going to be worth something someday.
Absolutely.
Because it's groundbreaking. It's revolutionary. It's evolutionary. And if you have a signed copy, and that's something special.
I want one.
Yeah. Both want one now.
You can count us in. We're doing it.
It's an investment.
There we go.
Like that.
Hopefully a little better than the Dogecoin I bought.
Dogecoin. Hey, I know about Dogecoin, and I got to tell you, when I got into it, if I had held it, I'd be a millionaire. Because Dogecoin used to only be 0.836 or something like it was like a fraction of a penny. Now it's worth 23 cents.
Yeah, not so more like 17, I think, but
17. Well, if you had 22 million of them, you know how much that is. That's like 2 point.
Bad dog. I'm gonna stick with cats.
I was gonna get rid of that
found
button.
A way to work that
I like that button.
I'm fond of the cat button myself. But
we have cats too, so that would be why.
All kidding aside, thank you so much for joining us, Mark. This has been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Really informative. Our audience has loved it, and I thank you everybody out there tonight in the audience for your questions and comments. Without you guys, we wouldn't have a show, so we really appreciate it. And we'll be back. We'll have a Dark Horse Paranormal podcast on Thursday. We have Robert Lindsay Milne as a guest. And next Saturday was the return of Lynn Monet and her haunting story. So we'll see you guys then. And thank you again.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.